Retro gaming in general seems as though it's become a very expensive hobby in recent years. Games that were worth pennies in the 80s, 90s or even early 2000s can now sell for hundreds, if not thousands. This reality has also given rise to retro games selling for tens of thousands of dollars on major auction sites, and a cigarette-stained SNES selling on DK Oldies for the price of an actual house. From a very specific copy of Super Mario Bros. Going for millions of dollars to special competition cartridges that were never designed for retail, the rarest and most expensive video games of all time are starting to match the prices people have been paying for rare comic books for years now. It's not a stretch to say that we're talking about the antiques of the future, with a mint copy of Bassmaster's Classic definitely being more interesting than some old plate. Let's take a look at the most impressive examples of how expensive retro games are these days, with some of them definitely not being a part of some money laundering scheme. Definitely not. Millionaires? My beloved millionaires breaking the law? They would never! Watch yourself guys, because we're going to be talking about more screws than Tim Robbins in The Shawshank Redemption. But before this list begins, we have one random Steam key to give away to one lucky viewer. To take part, simply comment down below 27k gang, and we will draw a winner next week. Right then, time to feel extremely poor. Number 15, Red Sea Crossing, $10,000 to $13,000. No, not a controversial prequel to Animal Crossing where Tom Nook taxes the Red Sea, but a true curio of the 1980s for the Atari 2600. Discovered in 2007 by someone scanning the wares of a local garage sale, Red Sea Crossing was eventually discovered to be a very rare game indeed. Tasking players with crossing the Red Sea as Moses himself, The Last of Us could never. The Atari 2600 title in of itself isn't that big of a deal. It's a pretty standard game for the time, appealing to a niche Christian gamer market. Roughly 100 copies were made, and the guy who made the game didn't seem to care what happened to them after that. Flash forward to near the end of the 2000s and a copy of Red Sea Crossing has been discovered. Only 2 copies are known to exist as of this writing, with one of those copies fetching an impressive $10,000 at auction. Really shouldn't have traded that other copy into GameStop when I was jonesing for V-Bucks, should I? Oh, you live, you learn. Number 14, Air Raid, $3,000 to $33,000. Air Raid is another ultra rare Atari 2600 release. Only 14 or so copies are known to exist, with even fewer of those being complete in box. A simple shoot 'em up with a unique cartridge design, Air Raid saw very limited distribution by its company Men-A-Vision, absolutely whipper of a name by the way, who only released just the one game. Before the 1983 market crash, it seemed as though everyone was making and selling Atari games, flooding the market with so many unremarkable products, some in extremely limited runs, that a few were bound to get lost in the shuffle. Until copies of the game with the box were discovered, with the first discovered example of such selling for over 30 grand in 2010, Atari fans weren't even sure the game was actually called Air Raid. Alternate titles to consider for an eventual sequel: Skyfight, pretty cool, explains itself, Planes, 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 open bracket, apparently, close bracket, and finally, is it a bird, is it a plane? Yes, actually, it is a plane. Number 13, Nintendo Campus Challenge, $14,000 to $20,000. If you're planning to devote your life to collecting every NES cartridge that ever officially existed, we've got some bad news for you. You may need to go to actual college and get a diploma in brain surgery to afford this game. Another example of the competition cartridges that Nintendo made for select events in which players went head to head in such games as Super Mario Bros. 3, Nintendo Campus Challenge has just one existing copy that anyone is aware of. That's right, just one. Sold twice in the 2000s, the game hasn't been heard from since. There's also little hope that another copy is going to be found anytime soon. The only reason why one exists at all is because a Nintendo employee kept it after all copies were ordered destroyed at the end of the 1991 competition. As for what you'll get for a cool 20k, demo versions of Super Mario Bros. 3, Pinbot and Dr. Mario. That's it. For 20 grand, you might expect a little more than that, but don't forget that you're probably going to be paying a lot more than that these days. Number 12, Stadium Events, $2,000 to $41,000. Another instance in which the version of the game in question is what really matters when it comes to value. Stadium Events began its life as a game for an NES accessory that was published by Bandai. Nintendo would soon buy the rights to the fitness mat and game, rebranding everything but keeping the exact same game and ordering all of Bandai's original copies, of which approximately 200 were sold, to be destroyed. While we don't know exactly how many copies are out there still, a CIB edition of the game has made its seller over $40,000 at auction. Collectors estimate that there might be as many as 20 copies of this game out there. The demand among these individuals has been so high that someone actually paid $10,000 for just the box? 10 grand for the box. A box. That's one very expensive tree shaving. Number 11, Nintendo World Championships 1990 Grey Gold variant, $8,000 to $40,000 plus. Yet another competition cartridge, Nintendo World Championships 1990 represents an extraordinary moment in time for Nintendo. The company had become so powerful over just a few years, they were able to start the 90s with a 30-city tournament for the best NES players around. Competitors had to come up with the best high score in just 6 minutes with 3 demo versions of popular Nintendo games, Super Mario Bros, Rad Racer and Tetris. Those who won in each age bracket received a grey copy of the Nintendo World Championships 1990, meaning around 90 were known to exist. That number has dropped significantly over the years, with grey editions selling for tens of thousands of dollars. The gold version is even rarer, as it was a prize from a Nintendo Power Contest. A gold copy of Nintendo World Championships 1990 can also go for 5-digit figures, with a near mint copy being valued at $160,000 or more. Could you imagine what kind of cartridge that kid who actually beat Tetris would deserve? Number 10, Contra, $150,000 plus. What the Contra is certainly not a difficult game to track down. The NES Classic established the run-and-gun formula like no one else ever had, inspiring numerous sequels and a franchise that is still among Konami's most beloved to this day. Contra is still one of the best NES games ever made to boot. Therefore, it's almost surreal to remember how easy it was to get your hands on this box just 30 years ago. However, if you're a hardcore collector and you've got a pristine edition of the game on hand, you might just be sitting on an absolute goldmine. Heritage Auctions, one of the most respected auctioneers of collectibles, claims the odds of having such a copy are pretty slim. That's likely why a near mint sealed 9.8 copy of Contra in its original box sold for roughly $150,000 in 2021. Despite that huge figure, Contra isn't even the most expensive NES game of all time, and not by a long shot. Number 9, Twisted Metal, $156,000. While Heritage Auctions has often come under criticism for its high prices and grading guidelines, there's no doubt they've become a go-to for collectors who want the most valuable games currently available. Twisted Metal, which has been seeing renewed interest with its new Peacock series, it's alright innit, it's alright, is considered rare because its packaging would soon be abandoned by Sony. The ridged long box style of casing was standard with the first run of Sony PlayStation games, and is also really cool. These relatively large boxes were not particularly popular at the time because people are stupid, but their extreme scarcity today makes sealed games like the Car Combat Classic some of the most sought after PS1 collectibles on the planet. Later editions of the original Twisted Metal go for significantly less, with the greatest hits version selling for about $45. A copy of the game that you can actually play, or a massively inflated, potentially pyramid scheming copy for 3,466 times as much. Make sure your wife knows which one you want for next Christmas, guys. Number 8, Super Mario Bros. 3, $156,000 plus. Ugh. Why is one of the best-selling NES games in history selling for over $150,000? It's as simple as the placement of the word bros on the box copy of Super Mario Bros. 3. The text on this particular edition of the game overlaps Mario's hand a bit. If you compare this version to other copies, you'll find that most versions put the word bros just above Mario's hat. Wow, that's really it, you might be asking. That's really it. We got to the moon and then just stopped progressing as a species from there. Some of the most valuable collectibles in popular culture achieved their rarity simply because there was a minor mistake in the production process. In this specific context of Super Mario Bros. 3, this simple error was enough to raise the value of the game in its original box by over 150,000 simoleons. Be right back, just gonna go and vandalise all of my copies of Just Dance 2017 and see what happens. Number 7, the original Final Fantasy, $200,000 plus.
I've come up with a new recipe.
Can't wait to try it.
If you want to play the original JRPG classic Final Fantasy, the first in one of the greatest video game franchises of all time, there's a bunch of different ways to do just that. None of those other options cost roughly as much as their home in certain parts of the United States though. Going for approximately $204,000 at auction in 2021, some people went really hard on pandemic depression spending, eh? There's nothing particularly special about this particular copy of Final Fantasy. Its sole distinguishing trait is simply that it exists in the best possible condition you're likely to find anywhere. The box and game almost look as though they were purchased just a little while ago. If you want a mint CIB copy of Final Fantasy, you may need to save up your gil, or be like Clive in Final Fantasy 16 and destroy all money on the planet. Number 6, Resident Evil, $260,000 plus. Ugh. Resident Evil changed video games forever, helped the PlayStation dominate the generation's console wars despite also being on the Saturn, and is still producing titles to this very day. All of that must have meant something very real to the individual who paid $264,000 for a copy of the game in the original, extremely rare, ridged long box. It's believed that there are less than 10 sealed editions of this particular long box version of Resident Evil on PlayStation in the whole entire world, and the overall spectacular condition of this example in particular was seemingly enough to fetch such a massive price at auction. That's a whole lot of sandwiches, guys. There's certainly an element of historical value to this decades-old copy of the original RE1. The ridged long box packaging, which we never got here in the UK, shows Sony still in the stages of figuring out what worked best for their new console, with its buyer also clearly trying to figure out what's not best for their accountant. Number 5, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, $300,000 plus. Returning once again to the seemingly distant shores of all the questionable decisions we made during the 2021 portion of the pandemic, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out sold for an extraordinary sum. It was graded as a WATA 9.8 A++ copy, which means this CIB copy is about the best condition you could hope to find for a 35-plus-year-old NES game. The condition of these games is naturally important to collectors. While a variety of factors influence the prices people were willing to pay for retro games at this moment in time, there's no doubt that one of the biggest factors is how hard it is to find these pristine editions. Time and other elements have made these items rarer than some comic books, and it's not hard to imagine that right now we are playing the antiques of the future. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is easy to get your hands on, but not like this. Whoever bought this should probably be about as embarrassed as Tyson himself when he realised Hasbulla is an adult man. Number 4, Sonic the Hedgehog, $400,000 plus. What? Another pristine, exceedingly rare copy of a classic video game that went for arguably too much money in 2021. Sonic the Hedgehog's shocking bidding war, which began at 75 grand, was so wild that even Sonic creator Yuji Naka commented on it, before he went to jail for insider trading. These last few years have been a lot, haven't they? They've been a lot. There's no question, however, that people were willing to pay a lot for a copy of the 1991 Sega Genesis Smash that perhaps reminded them of a birthday or Christmas from an earlier and better time. The market will reflect just how intensely someone will follow their desire to have the best possible copy of one of their favourite games. I mean, someone out there's favourite game is probably Brink, and if they're that unhinged, it makes sense that they'd spend 20 grand or something on it. Sonic the Hedgehog in sealed condition isn't going for nearly as much these days, although general CIB versions still sell for prices close to what the game demanded in its prime. We've still got a few more examples of the rarest and most expensive retro games of all time to consider, but this remains the most expensive Sega game of all time. Until the Blue Stinger retrospective adoration begins in earnest in 2024, that is. Number 3, The Legend of Zelda, $800,000, oh I feel dizzy. The The fact that The Legend of Zelda sold for close to $1 million Redinos in that surreal summer of 2021 seems a little bit excessive. It is. How many houses can you buy with that? Oh, not even the patio? The market's completely broken forever, is it? Oh yeah, fair enough. In fairness, this is not just a normal sealed copy of the NES Heavyweight, but a variant that existed for just 2 short months in 1987. 5 screws instead of 3 make this particular edition one of the rarest video games in history, and as such, it's entirely possible that this will be the only copy of this variant on the entire planet. That's a big deal to some retro collectors. It was important enough that someone paid an amount of money that anyone could conceivably use to build a massive game library. It's about quality and not quantity to some of the most dedicated, though the price leap from the prior entry is hard to overlook with a cynical eye. Number 2, Super Mario 64, $1.5 million. Oh, I'm tired, boss. I'm tired. $1.5 million Redinos for a Water 9.8A++ sealed copy of Super Mario 64 is a lot of money. Selling for a little less than that just 25 years ago, Super Mario 64 is one of the pillars of the lengths an individual will go for a flawless or near flawless copy of an iconic and beloved video game. Super Mario 64 proved the Nintendo 64 could deliver an extraordinary game. Its success and influence are still being felt to this very day. How much of a premium are you willing to accept on having a sealed physical representation of everything this legendary game might mean to you? Me personally, about I don't know, 100 quid? 100 quid or so? Yeah. For others though, there was seemingly no limit to what they were willing to pay in the summer of 2021. Most of us will never ever see the 1.56 million someone paid for Super Mario 64, but hey, if you want to help us get there, please smash like and subscribe. But auction houses saw even more than that for old Nintendo games in 2021. Number 1, Super Mario Bros. $2 million? $2 million? What are we doing here? What? It's easy to appreciate the collectible status of a factory sealed copy of Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo Entertainment System. Yet $2 million Delino Bambino seems to most of us like an unfathomable amount of money to pay for a Super Mario Bros. That looks as though it just rolled off the factory line. Some have said this is the best looking CIB edition of a game this old that has ever been discovered. There might be some truth to that. At one time in history, Super Mario Bros. Powered a dramatic rise for Nintendo and a full-scale comeback for the video game industry that continues to this very day. This is a game that was once dismissed as a mere fad, but hundreds of games later proves that wasn't quite accurate. The prices some were willing to pay in 2020 and 2021 and are still willing to pay now reflect just how far the industry has come from such sentiments. Even if someone finds a sealed copy of VIP signed by Pamela Anderson herself, this is a record unlikely to be broken, even if the authenticity of the sale has come under some scrutiny, with the auction house and grading service responsible being accused of artificially raising the price. Are we saying that's the case though? That a copy of Super Mario Bros. Sold for $500,000 more than the second most expensive game in history is a bit odd? In the middle of a gigantic world-ending financial bubble where the richest people in society fed on the insecurity of the entire planet? We couldn't possibly say. And that was our list for a bunch of games that cost about as much as a skin in Valorant. What's the most expensive game you own? Is there anything you have your eye on? Be sure to let us know down in the comments down below. I've been Jimmy for Cultured Vultures, and thank you for watching.